host, Monica Velasquez, for Live for the Journey podcast, and we are here with...
I'm Alex Ortiz. I'm a senior. I graduate in a couple weeks. I don't know when it's going up, but I graduate soon. I'm excited about that, and I am a journalism major.
So the reason that we have you on is because we're doing this spiritual life series.
Okay.
Really close to the end of the semester, but it's just kind of the first podcast. I interview Amy and Brian. They are pastoral chaplains, and I met them through youth group at Crossroads. I don't know if you've ever heard Crossroads. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they kind of went in depth on what is spiritual life as a whole and who God is and Jesus is. So for me, I told a little bit of my testimony in that video, and I grew up in the church but didn't really know Christ. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering what your perspective and journey with Christ has been.
Okay. Well, I guess since it's a bit of opposite of you, or not true opposite, sorry. I grew up in the church, and at least for most of my life, I think I knew Christ, right? Mm-hmm. In the sense of like growing up, I knew Jesus, I knew all the Bible stories, that sort of stuff. My world was the church, right? Although I will admit I did not like getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning for service, but what kid would? No. But the thing is, for me at least, is it was kind of like a religion for me. Like it was just like I do these, I try to follow the 10 Commandments, I try to follow all the rules, that sort of thing. Yeah. But the realization that Christianity is more of a faith than it is or it's meant to be a faith, not a religion, didn't hit me until I was in 8th grade when I was so locally, because I grew up here in Belton, and so local churches will participate in a thing called Discipleship Now, The Way, and it's actually hosted here at UMHB, which is really cool. And so it was only held in the chapel, right? So we'd be like in the afternoon and evening time, all the church vans would show up. We'd then park at the UMHB at the chapel. We'd do our worship inside, and then we'd all go back to our churches. It was a really cool experiment. Yeah. It's not experiment, but experience. But there was a minister, oh my gosh, I used to know his name. He grew up Muslim, and he went to A&M, and there he had his conversion experience. And so he was telling us his story. And because most of the time for pastors I'd heard at youth camps and stuff like that, they had been Christians their whole life, but hearing someone who wasn't a Christian explain to his conversion to Christianity, I was like, for some reason in my brain it all kind of like just clicked. Which, to add to the click, I guess, so Discipleship Now happened that week, right? Discipleship, or The Way, or D-Now as we would call it shorthand, D-Now happened. D-Now's emphasis chapter or emphasis book that week was the book of Romans, right? Mm-hmm. And specifically, and it's my favorite verse, is Romans 10:9, which is confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in all your heart that he died and was raised from the dead and you will be saved, right? Like that's kind of all it takes to be,
the gospel.
Yeah, that's the gospel summed up in one verse. Yeah. And so I love that, right? Well, that was the focus of D-Now. Well, outside of D-Now, at both in regular service and in youth group, right? The pastor was doing a series over Romans, right? In youth group, we were our Sunday school series and our Wednesday night series was over the entire Bible, but those 3 weeks leading up to D-Now were over Romans, right? And then on top of that, I was in an outside Bible study because my mom was so it's called an organization called BSF. I really enjoy it. It's kind of they have women's groups, men's groups, and then they have mixed co-ed children's group, or not children and youth groups and all that sort of stuff. And so my mother was a children's leader at one of the local chapters of it, so my sister and I would go, and so we'd be separated into our different groups. Well, regardless of what, I guess I'm gonna say tier, but regardless of what level you're at in whether you're in the men's study or the women's study or you're in the children's, and they of course separate they separate the children between kindergarten through 3rd grade to 5th grade, that sort of thing. Yeah. Right? They separate them that. Regardless of whatever level you're in, we all do the same study, right?
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So the study for the entire semester was Romans.
Okay.
So it's everything was Romans, right? Mm-hmm. And I used to make the joke, it's I hate Romans because it's all anyone wants to talk about nowadays. Well, we get, then flash forward through all that back to D-Now, the emphasis is all over Romans, and in that moment it's kind of it all just clicked. I was sitting there, he's preaching, he's talking about it, and then he shares that verse, and it's it just makes sense. It suddenly makes sense. I had, I knew Christ was Lord, and I did believe that he died and raised from the dead, but I realized that, like, I didn't have to follow all these different rules. I didn't have to follow, like, obviously, like, being a good person and, like, you know, since following the 10 Commandments, or, like, I say following the 10 Commandments, you know, the commandments, the other commandments Christ has given us, like, you know, the big ones being, like, love your neighbor as you love yourself, then also love the Lord with your heart, so, you know, with all your mind, your body, soul, and all that. Like, you know, those are things that we are called to do as Christians, but those aren't a requirement for us to be saved. And in that moment, it was like it all just made sense to me, right? It just clicked, and I was like, okay, well, now what do I do with this? And it's like, all right, like, you know, like, what is this? And so it's like, you know, I started to realize that Christianity was more of a faith. It didn't really, I guess, materialize fully into where I am today until I was actually tested, because, like, from...
It's them tests.
And actually, I've been hearing this said constantly the last few weeks by different people, but in a sense, God doesn't tempt us, he tests us, right? Like, and then Satan uses those tests to tempt us, right? Yeah. And so it's like, but in life just outside of church and all, like, you know, just struggling at school, struggling with friends, struggling with, you know, just in sense, temptation in general. It's like, you know, 8th grade up until, like, I'd say until, like, senior year of high school, right? Which, you know, my junior year of high school was taken over by COVID. My senior year, half of it was taken over by COVID, right? So that was just a rough time for everyone. But that, like, 4-year period was just really, really rough spiritually and all that, because it's like, okay, I have this faith, but what does that mean? Do I need to be, like, the kind of Christian that goes around being like, well, you can't be doing that, like, you know, do I need to be policing people? And then it was like, for real. And then God's like, well, no, Alex, like, what did Christ deal with? The Pharisees, what were the Pharisees doing? They were policing people. Okay, God, I see what you're saying. So it's like all this, you know, like, it was really, in a sense, it was definitely, like, I look back now, it's like, it's definitely a time I needed, because that really refined my faith and my belief, and it made, or my faith and belief, because it made me realize it's like, okay, I'm not called to condemn people, right? That's God's job. It's like, I think it's the verse, I think it's in Isaiah, you know, it's like, you know, he says, like, wrath is mine, like, in a sense, God will, you know, do all the judgment, that's his job, so it's not my job. And then it's like, you know, as time progressed, it was just like, you know, because I went to a high school that really what it is we were just the nerdy school, right? But it's like but no, that's like,
we had a brand.
We really did have a brand. Like, that's like, because you would go to our school if you wanted to learn how to do technology, animation, like, if you had any interest in the technical world, right? Like, it wasn't like a tech school or a magnet school, but it was like, we were actually, my school was sponsored by Apple until my sophomore or junior year.
Dang.
Yeah, like, so they paid for a lot of the, like, equipment we had there, which was really cool, and then they pulled funding, but that's a story for another time. But, like, and in a sense, like, okay, I know that's a bad term, but it's like, you know, my school, it's like, you know, but there was a high population of, like, you know, the LGBTQ community. There was a high population of, like, non-Christian. Like, I had a lot of friends that were either Muslim or Hindu. It was, in a sense, I called a nerd school, but really for me, it's like, I saw, because in a sense, I had gone to the normal high school, right? I mean, obviously, high school is a very big thing, has a very big scale to it. However, you can kind of very quickly get into your own little cliques, and you can kind of, like, avoid everything else. But at my school, that wasn't the case. You were surrounded by everyone and everything. It's like,
same.
I mean, it was like, in a sense, it tested my faith in the sense of, it's like, okay, now I am surrounded by people that don't think the way I think, that don't believe the same thing I think. Like, I think back in my life, like, I think I knew 1 or 2 atheists in my life before, or like both atheists and non-Christians. Like, I knew 2 atheists and I think 1 other non-Christian. Then I get to high school, and it's like, aside from my best friend and a few other friends that I had made there, everyone was either non-Christian or atheist, or, like, you know, or I guess either not. They were just non-Christian, and so it was crazy. And it's like, and of course you did have the Christians that did believe differently than I did. Like, they were okay with this or okay with that. And so in a sense, it was a testing time for me, because in a sense, without getting into, like, well, what does the Bible say, or what, you know, like, getting into like, well, like, you know, I guess
the
not nitty gritty or like biblical politics or anything like that. It was just a trying time, because it's like, okay, now I'm surrounded by people who believe and think and live fundamentally different ways than I do, right? And it's like, Lord, what do I do with this? And the thing is, throughout high school, is the thing he kept reminding me of is, in a sense, live like Christ did, right? Now, obviously, we know, and, like, I know in churches we say that, and it's like, okay, I gotta live perfectly, but that's not the whole thing, right? And obviously, it's a fool's errand to try and live perfectly. The big thing I had learned was, we are, in a sense, Christ loved others. We are, in a sense, we are called to love, right? And of course, that's something where I will say, and this is I want to make, because there's a difference between just loving everyone,
yeah,
and then there's loving them the way Christ did, which Christ, in a sense, loved them as if they were his children, in a sense, just loved people, but he didn't necessarily love what they're doing. And there's like the, I guess the, not the proverb, but there's like the saying that it's like, love the sinner, hate the sin, right? Sort of thing, right? It's like, in a sense, being surrounded by people who are not Christian, who are who are sinful, and we're all sinful, right? But it's just being surrounded by people who live and do different, live in the sin, exactly,
and don't believe or have faith in
precisely, Christ, And so it's like I realized there, because obviously, like, and I felt like I was kind of going through this independently of my other friends and all that. Like my best friend, he was fine, like he was chill, but like the other Christians I knew on campus were kind of the police force type, right? Yeah. And so it's like I did feel at that point, because then it's like, oh well, Alex, you're going too soft, like you're kind of like you're becoming, and I'm like, whoa, like that's not what's happening. It's like I am doing what Christ, like. Big thing, and I'll say this, it's like, Dungeons and Dragons, right? That's like both an outlet for me creatively, but that's also a way that I can, minister to others, because in a sense, I don't know a lot of Christians aside from myself and a few of my other friends that I've met, since starting playing Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know a lot of Christians who do, right? A lot of them are non-Christians, right? Even like, the campus has a club, right? And all that, and it's like, I know there's some Christians, I know there are a lot more who aren't Christian, right? And the neat thing about that is, and I kind of, in a sense, I'll use it the parallel with Christ. Christ would invite the kind of social outcast to his dinner table, right? The tax collector, exactly. Yeah, he'd invite all these people, right? Which the Pharisees, the religious elite, would have thought, oh, the Messiah would want us at his table, but instead he's inviting all these.
I literally was just reading Matthew, where he's like, the healthy don't need a doctor.
Precisely, yeah.
I was like, oh!
And so it's like, nowadays, the culture of how important it is to eat at someone's table isn't really there anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, of course we could all go and get something to eat.
I would still feel offended.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Why not me?
Yeah, exactly.
So I feel like that's still kind of there, but obviously not more in the traditional sense.
Precisely. And so then it was like, but I kind of use it, since my dinner table is Dungeons and Dragons, right? And since, I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are, and even the Christians that are there aren't necessarily like I say, to me they're fine, but like to the overall
culture.
To the culture, right? They're not necessarily the most upstanding Christian, which I will throw myself in that same category. Like I would, like from the cultural view, this corporate view, where it's like
I hate the cultural view.
It's like
I hate it because like you can't get outside of the world. You still have the world in Christianity. It's exactly annoying.
And it's like it's like, because I say upstanding in the sense, it's the idea that you have to be at church every single time the doors are open. You have to like since all these things, it's like yes, in a sense, go to church. Yes, read your Bible. Yes, do Bible study, stuff like that. But we're called to minister to the world, right? How can I minister to the world if I am in church 24/7, right?
That's true.
Because they're like, in a sense, like as much as I can say, hey, non-Christian friends, come with me to church. They know they're going to get judged. I know they're going to get judged. Why would they, in their right mind, like if I was in their shoes, why would I go to a church if I knew if I walked in with, like if I had cat ear, or if I walked in with anything, why would I go if I know I'm going to be judged, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like that I take, and it's like, D&D's my dinner table. It's like I invite people over. It's like that way it's like we can just have fun, right? Like in a sense we're playing a game, right? In a sense it's like, I know D&D itself has kind of a negative connotation to it as the devil's game, but it's like I will sit here and say it's not, but it's like it's a way to interact with people. It's a way to fellowship. It's a way, in the sense, and I don't sit there and be like, hey, so now that we played this game, let me minister to you. It's literally just being a nice person. It's like, wow, Alex, like you're a different Christian than I know. And it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point.
That's kind of the point.
It's like, that's what I'm here. It's like, I'm not trying to, and I guess anyone can sit here and be like, well, I can justify my actions, but I really do try to, in a sense, follow and mirror what, because again, that's something that's come through with me with life experience. I realized that when I try to be like the Pharisees, when I try to, and the other thing is like, for instance, like biblical, we say biblical doctrine, but in a sense with doctrine, right? Like in a sense, each denomination has its own doctrine. When we start to put that doctrine over the Bible, that leads to some problems too, right?
That leads to a Pharisee.
Yeah, exactly. It really does. And it's like the thing is, we forget that like doctrine was written by man, right? Like that, in a sense, obviously, like we should hope that, in a sense, God did have some influence in that doctrine being written. But like when we want to talk about the Word of God, when we want to talk about what actually, came from God and what we want to, in a sense, we need to follow, it's the Bible. It's what is outlined in the Bible, right? And of course, yes, we can talk about like, oh yeah, there's the Nicene Convention, right? Like basically, we can talk about all the parts that went into playing the Bible, but one of our fundamental beliefs is that the Bible is God's word, right? And so it's like in a sense, it's for me, it's what does the Bible outline? What does the Bible show, right? In a sense, what is that showing? Mm-hmm. And it's like, for me, that's what I put above doctrine, right? It's like doctrine's made up by, and it's essentially made up by us, right? Like,
they cherry pick what they like from the Bible, and then they're like, we're gonna do this, you're gonna do that, we don't like each other. It's like, oh, that's not what Acts was about.
Exactly. No, exactly. And it's like, the other fun thing too is, like, because I grew up in a bunch of different denominations too. Like, my dad was raised Catholic, he met my mom. My mom was raised Presbyterian, so then, he became a Presbyterian. I grew up Presbyterian. But of course, there's still some of that Catholic kind of influence.
Yeah.
Like we would still do Lent and stuff like that when I was growing up. Like my sister and I would do that growing up. And then of course, we became Methodist, and then now we're going to Baptist. But now, like myself, like even though I go to a Baptist church, I don't really affiliate with the denomination.
Yeah.
Like,
that's kind of how I am.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like because there's also, because I remember this as a kid, and I don't see it as much now, but I think that's just because we matured. But there's kind of like that mentality of, well, my church is better than your church.
No,
and
I had that mentality.
Okay,
it's gross.
It's really, and it's like,
I look back and I'm like,
yeah,
man, what is that mentality? Like, you're supposed to be one.
I'll say my parents are probably the chillest people I know. Like they are, like they really do serve as a good example on how to, because it's like, I have
chilling.
It's like, but I've got family members who since aren't Christian or who are. It's like, and just to see how they still love my relatives that aren't Christian or living in sin. It's like, and they served a good model, but again, I see what they're doing and I'm like, I don't get it, so I'm just gonna be like, but it's like,
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's like, I really didn't. And then it's not until I went through this whole trial period, but it was like, it's just because I began to really just start to see the ugly side of things. It's like, I began to understand, it's like, this is why non-believers don't, in a sense, trust Christians, and why they call us hypocrites and judgmental. It's because not only do the fact that even I as a Christian, right, even though I go to church, I believe in Christ, I do all the right things. It's like, I still get judged, right? I still get to church and it's like, oh, well, he's wearing shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops to church. Why would he do that? Or, I know he plays that devil game with his friends. It's like, I'm not making this up. Like, these are things that have been said or said about me.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like, I stopped going to one of the not college group, but I started going to one of the youth groups just because that was kind of, not that I was feeling pushed out. Like, no one had directly pushed me out, but I could feel the judgment.
That
was the vibe. But it's like, I get it. I understand why non-believers or why those struggling in their faith don't want to go to church, because it's not that God's going to judge you. It's that the people that
are supposed to represent God
yes.
are representing not God.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so... that was one of the main reasons why I didn't...
Yeah.
I grew up in the church.
Yeah.
I went from literally preschool to sophomore year in high school. And I was like... We suck.
Yeah, but and then it's like, okay, and then you start to look at the infighting, like you start to, not even like within a church, they bicker, but then like you get to denominations, it's like, we all say, oh yeah, we're all Christian, but then it's like to the outsider, it's like, well, the Baptists don't get along with the Methodists don't get along with the Catholics don't get along, it's like, what is this?
Yeah, because I remember like, it was here. Lord was planting seeds a long time ago, but here's whenever, I had to get away from that.
Yeah.
Because like how you said, you had the... a very niche. I had a very niche. I grew up with the same people my whole life. Mm-hmm. And I went to, what's it called? CCD. So that's like Sunday school, but like not Sunday school, or Catholic Sunday school. And me and my cousin would go. And there was to the point when I was like in 8th grade, I was the only one showing up.
Okay.
And I remember we would read the Bible, but the only Bible stories I remember is Jesus' birth and his crucifixion. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Like over the whole 12 years, that's all I remember. I remember going to we had to go to another church because our church was so small. They were like, you have to go with these people. And I was like, okay, cool. So I would go and I would hate it. Because I hated people. I hated people my age. Mm-hmm. I hated just everything. I was an angry, bitter person. I was going through things personally, but still. Like, the church was, supposed to be... And I remember, being in church and I was like, Lord, what's going on? And then it would just be, I would go to him when it would hurt. Mm-hmm. But once anything was good, I would go do whatever I wanted. Yeah. And I think that's really, what... Because if someone would have asked me then, oh, do you believe in God? I would have been like, yeah.
Yeah.
I would have been like, yeah, I follow God. Being a straight up liar, because I wasn't. I go to him when things went bad, and when things went good, I did what I wanted.
Exactly.
So it's very, like, I hated myself. I hated other people. I was like, Lord, what is this whole faith thing about? Because I grew up in it and it didn't do anything. And so the second I put my whatever, I was very, very broken at this point in time. So I was like, all right, I'm going to read the word. I'm a completely different person 2 years later. So it's like...
It's and actually, so, because it's fun. So, like, I know, like, we talk about, like, I guess in, like, church history, not church history class, but, like, in a sense, like, for instance, the Catholic Church, right? What kind of spurred on the Protestant Reformation is the fact that the Bible is read in Latin, right? The Bible would be read in Latin, then the priest would then, like, say some things to the people, right? But in a sense, like, one of Martin Luther's issues with the Catholic Church was the fact that it's, like, people did at the time, right? In a sense, people didn't have access to the word, right? It's like, here we are saying...
We don't read the word.
Yeah, we don't.
Still don't.
And that's the thing. It's still true today. It's not, in a sense, it's not just one church. It's all church. In a sense, like, yes, in a sense, like, we know we do quote the Bible. People do have access to the Bible. But I don't think that the vast majority realizes it's like, we're living the same way. It's like, even though the Bible's not being kept from us anymore, we're still not going to the Bible. We're still letting someone else tell us what to think and what to believe. And it's like, but, I mean, you're describing how you, in a sense, how, you know, you would, when things were bad, you'd call out to God. Like, that's how the Israelites lived, and that's, like, one of my favorite things. Like, you know, read your whole Bible. It's like, yes, the Gospels are good. Yes, the Gospels tell us how Christ lived, and it's like, that's how we're saved, right? Like, in since that is the good news. But read your whole Bible, because that gives you such a beautiful picture of everything, because it's like, the way you're, like, in a sense, think about it like Old and New Testament, in a sense, Old Testament's how we live before Christ, New Testament's how we live with Christ. It's like, in a sense, because the way you're living, that's the way I was living. It's like, when things were bad, I was like, God, help me out. And there's even the element of, even as we're, in a sense, renewed and we find peace with God, it's like, there is still that aspect of sometimes when things get good, we do kind of forget.
No.
Right? Like,
the Lord was like, I'm going to get you over that one.
Yeah, like, it's okay in the middle of school, right? It's like, you know, coming in the semester, it's like, I feel like I'm praying more than I did at the beginning of the semester, because it's like, oh, Lord, I've got this deadline, I've got this deadline.
For real. It's like, oh, okay, now you want to talk to people.
Yeah, and that's kind of just human nature, but it's like, I don't know, that's the thing. It's like, there's also just a beauty to the Bible as a whole, because it's like, you get, and again, there's and this is something I also like, is you can read the nitty gritty, right? But you can also back up and look at the overall story, and you almost get two different messages that are both can speak. And like, I don't know, I feel like anytime I crack open my Bible and read it, I get something new out of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I love YouVersion. I know it's how I feel. I don't have the Bible up, but like, you know, I read YouVersion, or like whenever they send me the verse of the day. The amount of times, Monica, I'm telling you, like, I either open up my phone that morning and it's like, dang, I needed to read that verse. Or sometimes, like, I won't do that, and I always feel guilty whenever I don't open the first thing I do is open my phone and not go to the Bible app, I feel bad for the rest of the day. It's like, I have mentors, I have, in a sense, pastors I like to talk to, and, you know, there's like, you know, I will always say, it's like, in a sense, go to, in a sense, the Bible talks about, in a sense, seek the wisdom of other Christians, right? In a sense, I seek wisdom a lot. But I will tell you, sometimes it's that verse, it's actually just opening the Bible that just gives me what, and that's the realization I came throughout high school, and then I got into college, and it was like, and specifically like my Old and New Testament classes, which I was, you know, I'm a Christian, but I was dreading taking those, because like, I've read the Bible my whole life, like, why do I need to do this? But it was taking those courses I began to get a whole new appreciation for the Bible, because it's not just the messages, but also it's the themes, and it's the, in a sense, this, I don't know, I got a lot more from those classes than I thought I was, and it's like...
Definitely.
The other thing is, it's like, I feel like, and granted, I can't say this for everyone, but it's like, I felt like for me, I got more out of taking it during a mini-mester, like over 3 weeks as opposed to a full, because knowing myself, if I had taken it for the full 16-week semester, I would have checked out.
Yeah.
But taking it over the course of 3 weeks, it's like, it's almost like every day it was a different sermon I needed to hear, which, I mean, it's not sermons, right? Like, it's just a lecture, right? And it's quite literally like, well, today class we read this book, and so, like, let's look at all the stuff that's, you know, it's not a sermon, but to me it's like, dang, like...
This makes sense.
Like, I needed to hear this, like, you know, like, it's crazy, just all the things that, you know, and it's just... I don't know, I could go on to, I mean, you know, how great the Bible is and all that sort of stuff, it's like... There's so many, and that's all a God thing, right? That is always, and so it's like, that was the thing, like, high school, it was rough, but then it's like, got to college, and it was just like, the Lord really said, okay, Alex, and since I whittled you down, right, I got you, and since I you know, since you were formed as this sort of cup, but in a sense, you know, we've kind of molded you back into a lump of clay, I'm going to shape you the way I want to shape you, and it's like, because the other thing is, I can feel it too, in a sense, it's like, I know when I'm saying the right thing. I know when I'm not saying the right thing and all that sort of stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's like,
annoying.
Yeah, and even when we're talking, I'm like, God, please, like, make sure I don't want to say the wrong thing accidentally. But it's like, I don't know. There's a different life to it, and so spiritual journey. It's like, I don't think, at least for me, I don't think Christianity would have ever meant what it meant to me if I hadn't gone through a hard time and if I hadn't trusted the Lord in it. And the other thing is that there, even for those who, like, if I had gone through that hard time and decided, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore, and I walked away from my faith, the cool thing is God's always there. Like, he
ain't gonna give up.
Even when you walk away from him, guess what he does? He walks behind you and stays really, and that's, I think, what meant the most to me. It's like, because, and one of my favorite stories is, when Christ is on the cross, and it's when the thief, whenever he's like, Lord, when he's like, Lord, when you enter paradise, or when remember me, and he says, truly I tell you, today you will be in paradise. And it's like, the fact that, in a sense, this man did not believe up until the very last minute. It's like, it's all these different stories. It's like God is always there. Christ is always there. Like, we're never alone. And it's like, for me, that's like, even though I didn't walk away from it, the fact that I knew that if I did walk away, God would still be there waiting for me to come back.
Yeah.
That just meant the world for me. I'm like, okay, God, then obviously there's a reason.
I can't let go.
Yeah, you can't let go. And it's like, okay, and then it's like, and then even at that point, because this was senior year when I really hit that realization, I was doing a Bible study at the time with a bunch of guys from my church, and we were doing where we kind of studied the whole Bible. And this all led up to one big, like, this is when I was like, man, like, okay, Lord, I'm fully giving myself back to you. We had read about David, we had read about, we had read about all these characters in the Bible, or I should not say characters, but all these people in the Bible who weren't the best people, but God still called them to, David wasn't a murderer and adulterer, and it's like, it's in a sense, it's his bloodline that leads to Christ. It's like, all this stuff. It's like crazy.
Assault Paul.
Yeah, it's
it's like crazy to me.
And that was one of the things. It's like, man, if God can take someone who is horrible, and that's right, not horrible, but take
sinner.
Take someone who's a sinner and still use them for good, then one way, I'm not like Saul or / Paul. I'm not murdering Christians. Like, I'm not over there throwing stones at Stephen. But like, if God can transform him, he can transform me.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I never once expected it to be this magical transformation that would just happen instantly. I'm a bit of a long-term thinker, so I'm always thinking, like, it's gonna take forever, right? And I'm always surprised when it doesn't take forever. But like, I don't know. I know because I just know in general, like, we can become discouraged if we don't have this immediate, like, realize it, whenever it just clicks, it's like, oh, wow, I'm going through this hard time, but I don't see the end in sight. Like, I don't think we're supposed to see the end in sight. We're not supposed to realize it's over until God makes it very blatantly clear. Yeah.
Very clear.
So you're sitting there that one day and it's like, it just makes sense, right?
It makes so much sense.
It just makes so much sense. Or you look back and it's like, I'm not the person I was. I'm not the person I was 2 years ago. It's like, I got to the end of high school and I'm like, okay, I'm not the person I was 4 years ago, and I'm now about to graduate from UMHB, and I'm like, I'm not the person I was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I've seen a lot, going back to the audience. It's like, we are all going through something, and I think that's the humility. That's why we need humility, because before I was a Christ follower, I judged people a lot. No church without church. Yeah. We are sinners, and people hear that, and it's kind of like referring to a good friend that tells you the truth even when they know it's gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
But it's the truth. So it's like, this hurts a lot right now, but I'd rather know it than later know that you could have told me it the whole time.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. And it's something that is gonna benefit you, because with the walk with Christ, it's very easy to get sucked into culture, and that's what happened to me. I became a Pharisee, and it's like, I pray for those who are still Pharisees, because it's not a fun life.
No, it's not.
It's not. And like, that's what the Lord does. He's like, pray for your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. That's the church.
Most importantly, he also says, love your enemies.
Love your enemies. And it's like, that's the church. That was me. I was the enemy of God for a minute there. And it's like, that's what Christ is. It's not, okay, when you are this and this and this, I'll love you. But the second that you do this, I don't love you anymore. And it's like, a lot of people just have a lot of pain and hurt, and they're trying to fill their lives with things that only God can fill.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that for me was the answer. World and in society, it's like love is everything that you want or everything that you enjoy, but it's not. Love is patient, love is kind, love is gentle. Oh yeah, love is not boastful. Yes. Yeah. And then when you learn that, you're like, oh, you see the people around you and you're like, they don't know what love is. And then you have anger, you have bitter, you have this, and this. But the truth is the word. And it doesn't change. That's the one thing I love about God. He don't change. We change. This morning, I was a different person. Because we, like, emotions, the temperature, the people I'm around, like,
it all changes.
It changes me, and it changes other people. But yeah.
I think, so in a sense, culture is a big thing, right? But the other thing is, I think we need to remind ourselves is culture also, in a sense, like, there's a story of, I believe it came from, there's a man or I say India, I think the story originates from India. Anyways, there's a man who figures out how to change the world, how to save the world, how to make it a better place. So first he tells his country's India, right? He says, guys, this is how we're going to do it. No one does it, right? So then he goes to his province, tells his province no one does it. He goes to a city tells the city doesn't do it, right? He tells his family doesn't do it. And then after all that, he realizes that change does not happen on the large scale. It happens on the individual scale. If he changes, right, then the people around him, it's all about, it's
like a chain reaction.
Yeah, exactly, the chain reaction. So it's like, in a sense, not only do we have to, in a sense, as Christians, be kind of countercultural, right? In a sense, not
very
both countercultural to the worldly culture, but also, in a sense, the church culture. The church culture. Yeah. But then the other thing is, it's like we almost need to shift our own perspective. Since we need to remind ourselves, hey, I need to love my neighbor, right? I need to love my enemy. I need to, in a sense, the beatitudes of love. And so there are all these things. It's like, that's not a like thing that I can just do. You have to really, in a sense, shift your perspective. You have to stop looking at the net, in a sense, rather than look at someone and see evil. You have to look at them the way that God does, and God sees his children. God see, like, he can see something, and the other thing is, and a friend had given this to me, and I hold on to it so much, is remember that we are all created in the image of God. Yeah. And, like, that's the big thing. It's like, shoot, how can I be mad at you if we were both created in the same image?
Thank you, Alex, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I just hope you guys get something out of this that was more constructive on, there's a lot of things coming at you, and it's very easy to become angry, bitter, and hate a certain group of people. But God isn't a certain group of people. He is God. He is the Alpha and Omega. So go to him. Talk to him. Because I promise you, if you actually have a willing heart, meaning if you're actually wanting to hear something back, and you position yourself in a way that you will hear him. Yeah. There's no more context after that. Just do that. And also, just, I think another step maybe taking is surrounding yourself around people who maybe don't think the same way as you. Because when you're with someone that that is worldly, they're gonna have the worldly view of Christ. But when you're with someone who is supposed to represent Christ, and if you feel like they're wrong, go to the Word. Because we are also human, but it isn't a excuse to do whatever we want, if that makes sense. But yeah, thank you guys for watching.
Thank you, Monica.